On this week's Inside Outside Innovation, Robyn and I sit down to talk about the AI question that no one wants to answer, the power of a good value proposition, and why industry veterans are building tomorrow's billion-dollar startups. Let's get started. Inside Outside Innovation is the podcast to help innovation leaders navigate what's next. Each week, we'll give you a front row seat into what it takes to grow and thrive in a world of hyper uncertainty and accelerating change. Join me, Brian Ardinger, and Mile Zero's Robyn Bolton as we discuss the latest tools, tactics, and trends for creating innovations with impact. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. I'm your host, Brian Ardinger, and we have Robyn Bolton, our co-host from Mile Zero. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you. Great to be here as always.
We've got a number of different articles we're going to talk about today. As everyone knows, this podcast is about giving the real insights of what's going on in the world when it comes to innovation. What's going on in your world?
It's funny. It's time of year, so it feels like everyone is both wrapping up and gearing up, trying to bring things to a close so we can all effortlessly go on the holidays. But January will be here before you know it. And so people are already starting to think about what's going on with AI in 2026 and what does the new world of work look like.
I'm looking forward to my inbox being filled with the best things that happened in 2025 and what to look forward to in 2026 and that kind of year-end wrap stuff that you get. It's interesting times, especially like on the investment front. You know, a lot of things slow down at the end of the year as people start planning for it. I kind of love and hate this time of year from the standpoint of gives you some time sometimes to do that stuff that you don't always have time to do and remap what you're going to do for 2026.
Yes. And speaking of the emails wrapping things up, Spotify's Yearend wrap came out, I think, a couple of days ago. So also getting a lot of those in the old inbox.
All right, well, let's get into it. We've got a couple of articles to talk to today. The first one that we came upon was from KP Ready. It is called The AI Question Nobody Wants to Answer. And KP does a good analysis. He basically says, is the juice worth the squeeze when it comes to AI? And I think a lot of people are asking that question right now. You know, as more and more enterprises, you're hearing about more and more experiments, more and more people using the technology, and you're getting conflicting results and feedback on, is this really paying off? All the money that's being spent into AI, all the things that we're doing around it, are we seeing the returns? And when will we see the returns? You know, from my understanding and what I've seen, the question is not like, will we receive returns, but when, and how do we get through this exploration phase so that we can be effective with using the dollars and the time and the resources around this to actually find the value that's created. And so let's start with that particular article. What was your thought on it?
You know, there's always this level of uncertainty around new technologies of, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are we going to get ROI? When are we going to get ROI? Running lots of experiments. But it definitely seems like AI has kind of amplified that. I actually just wrote a blog post asking, like, did your AI strategy, was it developed by the underpants gnomes? And just in case we have listeners who don't know who the underpants gnomes are, they are from South Park. And basically their business plan is phase 1, collect underpants, phase 2, question mark, phase 3, profit. And it just seems like there are so many AI startups, companies, experts, consultants, et cetera, out there who have become underpants gnomes and kind of just have this like, hi, put it on top of everything and profit. And no one's kind of slowing down to kind of like, well, do we even need AI? How do we need it? Like, what makes sense here?
Well, I think a lot of people are not necessarily thinking, they feel the pressure to start doing something with AI. And so they start immediately deploying and doing things without looking at, well, is this a particular area that really would benefit or we could create real value if we can get this right? And they oftentimes overlook some of the other kind of hidden costs when you talk about it deploying technology that's new or different. And I think more importantly, how it affects the culture of the people deploying it. So you got the data infrastructure costs, you've got the integration complexity, you've got the change management, ongoing maintenance, all these kind of hidden costs when you're dealing with a brand new technology that you don't necessarily know. And some of the things I saw in the article that were interesting and I've seen in real life too is how you can kind of maybe think through this process of, which particular projects should we deploy in that. Don't be afraid to kill experiments quickly. If you're not seeing ROI in a particular area, maybe shelve that particular idea and focus on one that is showing some value to it. Don't focus on having to deploy it everywhere all at once. Again, try to find the particular areas or the particular people that are more willing and able to make those steps. And then thinking about that you have to build everything yourself. I think that's another place where I'm seeing a lot of brand new tools and folks out there that are trying things that have already built some things that maybe you can go out and purchase and buy and experiment rather than having to come up with your own team to do and make all the mistakes that they're probably already going through it and made that tool in the first place.
It's all great advice. And I just want to underscore the people aspect is you have people who are going to use this, people that you hope will benefit from it, some people who will be resistant. And so don't underestimate the people, the human AI interaction and all of those dynamics as part of the rollout, the implementation, the change management, all of that.
All right. The second article is from our good friend Ben Yaskovitz. He always puts out some great stuff. His article on his Substack called Focus Chaos is called The Real Differentiator in the AI Era, a Sharp, Specific Value Proposition. Ben talks about how a lot of folks are falling into particular traps of, again, thinking that, well, I've got AI is so hot, I'm going to be deploying AI and let's go out there and build a startup around that. And without thinking about, well, what are we actually building? Why are we building it? What's the value proposition? And it's led to a lot of generic types of workflow automation tools, things that aren't necessarily differentiated from a customer perspective. And so his bet is that, the sharper, more precise the value proposition, the higher likelihood that you're going to survive and thrive. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was interesting because I've been reading about how AI is going to usher in a new age of generalists. And then so to see Ben come out and say, oh no, it's about the specialists. As I read more about it, and Ben's a great writer, I realized that there's absolutely the need for both. And the case that Ben is talking about of creating the AI tools, I do agree with him that like the specialists of creating for a very specific use case. And that person who has lived it, some of the examples that they gave of a nurse who created an AI for a specific context, that makes a ton of sense because then as a user, your odds of getting higher quality output are probably much, much higher because an expert has created this. And especially I think in corporations, you're going to need generalists who can see the value and can integrate all of these specialist sort of AI agents and perspectives into something that works at scale. So it was a very, very interesting, provocative article to read.
One of the things I liked about Ben is he kind of encapsulated, like, how do you talk about your value proposition and make it into concise, quick bullet point kind of thing where if you're talking about it to somebody, they can quickly understand that. And so his kind of Mad Libs approach, he had a sentence that basically said, for your specific audience who, whatever specific context or pain they're having, our product delivers this outcome by some unique mechanism or approach so that you can actually create some specific business result. And you can put your Mad Lib into that particular sentence. And if you can do that, articulate that quickly and repeatedly, you can probably have a chance to have better conversations when you're going about it and hopefully hit the mark faster than if you're just out there doing whatever it is from a general perspective.
And it's good advice, I'd say, for any business owner, because I tried to do that with my business and failed miserably, but took that as a learning. I was like, all right, this is work I got to do.
Well, I think that's a great point because a lot of times I think we think about, well, we have to have that perfect Mad Lib. We have to have that. And rather than thinking of it, it's got to be perfect the first time out and this is what the company is and this is where we're going to be, think about it as a starting point and or this is our best guess at this point, and then test it, try it. The more you talk to people and realize, oh, that's not the right specific niche or specific domain expertise I should be focused on. But by having that conversation with a more predefined, easily understandable force has a better chance of having those conversations that point you in the right direction if you are off track.
Absolutely, 100%.
And the third article actually kind of overlapped some of the stuff that Ben was writing about, but Wildfire Labs has an article about the domain expert revolution and why industry veterans are building tomorrow's billion-dollar startups. And again, this shift from the generalist to folks who maybe have been in business for 15, 20, 25 years, who understand the problems and things that are going on that can actually then use that domain expertise to create something of value and create a startup or innovation that really has an impact.
Yeah. And just to illustrate how much overlap and compatibility there is between Ben's article and the one we're talking about now, I confused the two. It was the wildfire article that talked about 45-year-old nurse who spent 20 years watching hospital workflows break. Another example in there of wildfighters who built a resource coordination platform. So it just reinforces what Ben was talking about of the domain expertise that is going to become more and more important as AI platforms, tools, agents, et cetera, become easier and easier to make. You're going to need to get more and more specific on what your value truly is.
Well, and I think it opens up a lot of different new entrepreneurship opportunities for folks who may not have thought of themselves as entrepreneurs. The person who's worked in a company for 20 years, who knows the regulations and how to navigate that, they know which particular solutions are out there, the competitors, et cetera. Maybe they have an opportunity to become an entrepreneur and start a startup with these new tools and tactics out there to leverage up the domain expertise and actually solve the problems that are really important in the marketplace.
And it may completely change a lot of things, but even corporate innovation, because now the people within companies or people within organizations like this nurse or this firefighters who have been frustrated for a while, but trying to get traction from the bosses and funding, and they don't need to wait for all of that to go create a solution. And that could have some really interesting ripple effects on how employees start viewing themselves as entrepreneurs, how corporations start viewing open innovation, what open innovation starts to look like in terms of what people have to show and produce. It's not just about the idea, it's easier to create a prototype. So there's some interesting ripple effects that could come from this as well.
And the last thing that he talks about in this article, I guess from an investor perspective, he said, stop recruiting Stanford dropouts, start recruiting industry lifers, look for folks who can actually, rather than just build the app, understand what it means to create the value that the app will provide out there. Another way to think about it. Excellent. Well, we're now in our section of tactics to try, and I'll throw out a short one. So we're heading into the holiday party season, and I had one last night, and I've got, I think, 2 or 3 in the next week or two, industry parties and gatherings. And so I thought it might be interesting tactic to try is to start tracking my conversations around these topics of AI. What are the real tools and tactics that people are actually using? Outside of ChatGPT, for example, what are people using this for? Maybe talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends and say, hey, are you using this stuff? We're hearing a lot about it in the press and that, but fundamentally, how are you using it? Are you using it for work? Obviously, I've seen a lot of new stuff coming out of the Black Friday sales where AI shopping research is on the rise. Have any of your friends used AI for shopping, travel, etc.? So I'm going to be taking the holiday season and sprinkling in my conversation to find out how are people actually using these new technologies out there.
So great minds think alike. I've been doing the same thing, asking people about how they're using AI. Are they using AI? How are they using it in their companies? And all the press we hear, you and I talk all the time about AI. So I'm always amazed that people are like, yeah, no, I'm not touching that thing. And it's for good reasons. They're afraid of being replaced by AI, but there's also so many other uses. Like, I have these 5 ingredients in my kitchen. What can I make for dinner tonight? So it's just interesting to ask the question, as you said, and find out the real everyday reality of where AI is versus what we're hearing and seeing in the media.
Absolutely. Well, that's another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. We'll be talking about AI, I'm sure, in the next coming days and weeks.
Always.
Appreciate everyone who comes out and listens to this. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Inside Outside Innovation.
See you next time.
That's it for another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. Today's episode was produced and engineered by Susan Stiebel. If you want to learn more about our teams, our content, our services, check out insideoutside.io. Or if you want to connect with Robyn Bolton, go to milezero.io. And until next time, go out and innovate.